To complete the most significant news for this day, Y News continues. Here are the top stories. The United States government is preparing to return the historic Balangiga bells to the Philippines. During a ceremony in Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming, U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis assured that the Balangiga bells will be returned to the Philippines this year. Philippine Ambassador to the U.S. Jose Manuel Romualdez says the bells and its engravings were well preserved in a memorial marker. The Balangiga bells were taken as war trophies by the U.S. Army from eastern Samar in the 1900s. The ringing of the bells said to have signaled the attack of the Bolo tribesmen against the Company C of the 9th U.S. Infantry Group, which led to the massacre. President Rodrigo Duterte first made mention of the bells last year during the defense ministers' meeting at Clark Air Base. The U.S. plans to take the two bells to a facility in Philadelphia and then in South Korea, where the third Balangiga bell was kept before returning to the Philippines.
A part of our history, the Filipino-American War in the 1900s, and of course many people died in that war, and we honor those people. But more than that, we also honor those people who died during World War II and the many wars that we fought together with the United States.
President Rodrigo Duterte underscores the importance of the immediate creation and finalization of the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea amid brewing tensions between China and Western countries. During the ASEAN-China Summit in Singapore, Duterte said that having a code of conduct is necessary as China seemed unstoppable in its island and facility building on the hotly contested territory. The chief executive implied that China's three-year bargain of negotiating for a COC might bring the friction among nations into something uncontrollable. That is why a set of rules must be hammered as soon as possible by friction. Duterte remains holding military activities that would only trigger a much larger problem.
China is there. That's a reality. And America and everybody should realize that they are there. So if you just keep on creating friction, little friction, one day a bad miscalculation could turn things Murphy's Law. If anything can go wrong, it will go wrong.
Duterte fears that the Philippines will be the first to suffer if claimant nations want to wage war against one another over these islands.
I do not mind everybody going to war, except that the Philippines is just beside those islands.
Thank you.
And if there's a shooting there, my country will be the first to suffer. That is my only national interest there, nothing else.
In other news, the Department of Public Works and Highways formally opens to motorists the modernized segment of Laguna Lake Highway, formerly known as the C6 Road. DPWH Secretary Mark Villar says the newly opened 4-lane national road will help connect the eastern portions of Metro Manila to certain towns in Rizal. It will also provide alternate roads for motorists traversing EDSA and C5 to Taytay. Villar says a toll-free road will cut down travel time from Taguig to Taytay from more than an hour to just 30 minutes and will also help ease the anticipated traffic congestion during the holiday rush. The project, which costs more than 1 billion pesos, is part of the administration's Build, Build, Build program.
Pero ito matibay po, makapal po ang semento, pang commercial talaga ito. Kung dati po itong alignment po ay graba, kaya hindi talaga pang commercial. Pero ngayon po napakakapal ng semento.
Meanwhile, a group of local farmers opposes the enactment of the rice tariffication bill, saying this will put them at a disadvantage when low-priced imported rice stocks flood the country. Senate Bill number 1998, or the Rice Tariffication Bill, has passed the third and final reading. If enacted into law, it will allow private sectors to import more rice to prevent shortage of supply and its consequent increase in prices. The bill is also seen to help eradicate corruption and cartels from the country's rice industry. But Jimmy Tadeo of Paragos, Pilipinas blames rice shortage on land conversion and the high cost of farming rice.
lalong tatamaan ng mga magsasakang Pilipino. Kasi pagdagsa ng murang bigas dito, dahil ang ating napakataas ng gastusin sa produksyon, paano tayo makikipag-compete?
Agriculture Secretary Manny Piñol, however, argues that the proposed measure is actually beneficial to local farmers.
Because now we could support our farmers with good seeds, with maybe subsidized fertilizers that would improve their productivity. And when their productivity is improved, they don't have to cry for a higher price for their palay anymore.
Senator Panfilo Lacson is pushing a proposal which seeks to reform the system of the value-added tax in the country and reduce its rate from 12% to 10%. Lacson believes this measure will help the government attain its annual revenue targets amid the projected losses following the suspension of the second tranche of fuel tax hikes under the tax reform law in 2019. The lawmaker is also looking to reduce the number of sectors that are exempted from paying VAT. Lacson hopes his proposal will gain enough support to hurdle congressional scrutiny.
Imagine, binaba mo na ng 10%, naka-generate ka pa ng 117 billion incremental revenue. Tayong pinakamaraming exemption sa buong Asia or Southeast Asia for that matter.
Police investigators are yet to identify witnesses in an ambush in La Union that killed Balawan Vice Mayor Alfred Concepcion and wounded his daughter, Mayor Aleli Concepcion. According to Philippine National Police Chief Oscar Albayalde, there are no witnesses surfacing so far to testify on the said case. General Albayalde also says that initial investigations revealed that the Concepcions were not on the police drug watch list. The PNP chief also noted that La Union is among the election hotspots due to intense political rivalry. The father and daughter tandem were ambushed while on their way to the municipal hall last Tuesday.
In any incident, the very important thing here is the witnesses who can give a full account or probably identify or probably give suspects dito sa or persons of interest dito sa mga incidents.
And for the news abroad, here's Kath Dumaraos live from Bangkok, Thailand. Kath, good evening.
Good evening, William. British Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit secretary and other ministers quit one by one on Thursday, striking at the heart of a draft divorce deal with the European Union she is struggling to save. Just over 12 hours after May announced that her team of top ministers had agreed to the terms of the draft agreement, Brexit Minister Dominic Raab and Work and Pensions Minister Esther McVey quit, saying they could not support it. Their departure and the resignations of two junior ministers shakes May divided government. Raab is the second Brexit secretary to quit over May's plans to leave the European Union, the biggest shift in British policy in more than 40 years. U.S. Defense Chief Jim Mattis defends the government's move to deploy troops to Mexico border as Central American migrants arrive at the U.S. doorstep. Beverly Saison tells us why.
U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis asserts the mission of soldiers was absolutely legal and justified and that it was improving military readiness in defense of the deployment of thousands of troops to the border with Mexico. President Donald Trump's politically charged decision to send U.S. troops to the Mexico border came ahead of U.S. midterm congressional elections last week as Trump sought to strengthen border security as part of a crackdown on illegal immigration. Trump supporters, including Republicans in Congress, have embraced the deployment. But critics have assailed the decision, calling it a political stunt to drive Republican voters to the polls. They have scoffed at Trump's comparison of caravans of Central American migrants, including women and children, to an invasion. Mattis, speaking to a small group of reporters traveling with him, rejected criticism and said the deployment was the right thing to do.
Right now, the only thing we've been asked for is to put in obstacles, provide transportation, and to provide housing for border. They've had to move a number of Border Patrol people in a position where they just didn't, they moved them from other places. So obstacle emplacement, transportation.
Mattis said U.S. soldiers were making rapid progress erecting barriers along the border and estimated the first construction phase of the U.S. military effort could be completed within 10 days. The U.S. military was also rehearsing helicopter operations to help support U.S. border personnel, potentially flying them to new locations if the caravans of migrants shift direction.
The Department of Defense missions do not involve military personnel at this time directly participating in any law enforcement. Law enforcement is left in the hands of the Customs and Border Police, who have the statutory authority to carry that out. At the present, I do not anticipate military personnel coming into direct contact with migrants.
Meanwhile, some 340 migrants arrived in Tijuana, Mexico Wednesday after 9 buses shuttled them to the city just across the border from the United States. The migrants waited in line to enter shelter, where many said they intended to rest until the remainder of the caravan also arrived. In the past few days, up to 1,000 migrants linked to the caravans have arrived in Tijuana, with similar number expected to arrive in the next day or so. Thousands more could arrive in border towns over the coming days. Beverly Saison, UNTV News and Rescue, USA.
National Security Aide Mira Ricardel departs the White House after she ran afoul of U.S. First Lady Melania Trump. Meanwhile, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's conservative coalition government receives a blow following the resignation of Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman. This report tells us why. In USA, Mira Ricardel, the White House Deputy National Security Advisor, was forced out of her job on Wednesday after President Donald Trump's wife Melania said Ricardel did not deserve the honor of working for her husband. White House spokesman Sarah Sanders said in a statement that Ricardel will continue to support the president as she departs the White House to transition to a new role within the administration. Sanders did not elaborate on what Ricardel's new job would be. She ran afoul of Melania Trump and her staff in negotiations over the First Lady's trip to Africa in October and the use of government resources for the trip, a senior administration official said. Ricardel is a former Commerce Department official handpicked by Trump's National Security Advisor John Bolton to serve as his deputy. In Israel, Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman announced his resignation on Wednesday in protest over a Gaza ceasefire that he called a capitulation of terror, weakening Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's conservative coalition government. Lieberman said his resignation also withdraws his far-right Israel Beitenu party from the coalition. Israeli political commentators had speculated that Netanyahu, who despite his approval ratings has been dogged by multiple corruption investigations, might bring forward the ballot. But a spokesman for his rightist Likud party played down that option, saying Netanyahu would assume the defense post. And in Bangladesh, preparations to repatriate an initial batch of Rohingya Muslims to Myanmar has begun, but it is still unclear if any of them want to return, humanitarian officials said. Bangladesh and Myanmar agreed in late October to repatriate hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees, even though the United Nations Refugee Agency and aid groups say doubts persist about safety in Myanmar. There are also concerns that the Rohingya don't want to go back. The repatriation of the first group of 2,200 refugees is set to officially begin on Thursday, and officials in Myanmar say they are ready for them. Kat Dumaraos, UNTV News and Rescue. And those are the news from the other parts of the globe. Back to you, William.
Thank you very much, Kath Dumaraos, live from Bangkok, Thailand. An artist from the United Kingdom is giving a new lease of life to old cardboards by turning it into elaborate sculptures and paintings. Leslie Longbowen tells us why.
English artist James Lake began sculpting after he lost his leg to bone cancer at 17 as a form of rehabilitation. Lake, based in the southwestern English city of Exeter, says he had always been interested in art, particularly drawing, as well as exploring and walking. The loss of his leg and chemotherapy meant he was confined to one room, and he began to create art in order to change his immediate environment in a positive way.
Found myself trying to, in a way, trying to rehabilitate myself, and I kind of found at one point not being able to kind of move kind of in the environment as I once had.
Cardboard was easy to access and cheap. He got it from his local supermarket. Lake produces a wide variety of sculptures ranging from flowers to figures, both whole bodies and heads. He creates the sculptures by initially sketching them out on cardboard, building an internal structure with hot glue and masking tape, and then builds the sculpture up, adding the final details with very small pieces of card.
So within this work, this work, Flat Pack Anatomy, was kind of designed to be something that you could print out, put for a photocopy, and that anybody could kind of get access to it. And in a way, it's quite a complicated structure, but it's a complete internal structure for a human face, which you can kind of build out over the top of. So this is, in a nutshell, me trying to pass on some of the skills that I kind of taught myself.
Lake continues to discover the possibilities and the versatile material, and has become further interested in the value of his time, effort, and care placed on the disposable packaging. Currently, the artist runs art workshops in his community, providing a resource to propel sculptural artist practices in local schools and colleges. Leslie Lomboan, UNTV News and Rescue.
And those are the reasons behind the news November 15, 2018. On behalf of Rheena, Villamor-Camara, and Angelo Castro III, I am William Thio. Because we need to know, we will always ask why. Good evening.